this episode, we'll demonstrate how the workflows required to offboard an employee can be automated through an ETM application. For this demonstration, we'll use the Oomnitza ETM application and its low-code user interface. Of course, your employee offboarding process will differ from this example. If you find that your employee offboarding process is largely done manually today, I invite you to find out how to document this process through an ETM application's low-code user interface as a first step to autonomous IT.
The first step in the secure offboarding framework will always be the workflow of separation. The separation workflow will trigger 2 days prior to the offboarding or separation date of the employee. This is of course configurable, can be configured to be with much more lead time than just 2 days. From that point, we would create a manager approval to kickstart the events. For SOC 2 logging and tracking, we could create a service desk ticket, even though that doesn't necessarily run any action. It's mostly just to have a running bill of actions that took place, and we can continue to update that ticket over time as more and more offboarding events take place through the secure offboarding framework. Here's where the real action starts. We're going to use this ship engine integration in our workflow engine to create a shipping label and send a box and that shipping label to the offboarding user or employee. A manifest of all of the endpoints that employee owns and accessories that employee owns and are due for return will be sent to them, as well as their manager, HR, and IT. These will also go into other escalation paths in another workflow to make sure we recover all of those endpoints and accessories. Oomnitza will also run a check to see if these endpoints or other technology objects need to go into a legal hold process. If they do, we have our own legal hold process built into Oomnitza, which can trigger a set of parallel processes to make sure that we capture those endpoints and other technology objects for legal hold. During this whole time, we'll be updating the existing help desk and service desk ticket for better tracking and logging to make sure that in an audit case, or if we ever need to show evidence for SOC 2 or some other sort of compliance standard, we have that available, even though the actual actions are all being automated and pushed through this separation workflow, which is the first step in the ETM framework of secure offboarding. The second step of secure offboarding is the deprovisioning workflow. The deprovisioning workflow would start on the day of separation for this employee. The first thing we would do is set the employee status to offboarding and to make sure that we deprovision them in the identity management and single sign-on applications that this company uses. In this workflow example, this company is using Okta, so we want to make sure on the day of separation to deactivate their Okta accounts, which will automatically log them out of all of the SaaS applications, as well as to invalidate all of their open browser sessions to make sure they're immediately logged out of any application they may still be using. From there, we're going to look at all of the endpoints that this user has to make sure that if it's an Apple device, we're remotely logging that endpoint in Jamf. And if it's a Windows device, in this case, we're remotely logging that endpoint in VMware's Workspace ONE application. Of course, both of these are just example MDM and configuration management tools that we have integrations to. We integrate to 100+ systems everywhere else. A follow-on step here could be that we look at any cloud or infrastructure ownership that this employee has assigned to them to make sure that we spin down those instances or change ownership right away. We have so many horror stories, and I'm sure you've heard these as well, where an employee leaves the company but still has access to, for example, an AWS or EC2 instance weeks or even months after they finished working at the company. For obvious reasons, this is a major security issue. And finally, in the deprovisioning phase, although we've already deactivated the users from Okta, so we've taken them out in a way of being able to log into their core SaaS apps, we still need to offboard those licenses and start to bring them back into the entitlement pool. This has huge financial efficiency for the company, especially if it happens right here on the day of offboarding or separation, such that the company can proactively start planning ahead and revitalizing the inventory of those SaaS application seats. So just with this one offboard SaaS licenses block, we're able to launch a number of other workflows which will reach into the individual SaaS systems that you are using and claw back those seats and licenses to the entitlement pool. Now let's take a look at the next workflow in our secure offboarding set of events. The third step of secure offboarding is reassignment. In the workflow of reassignment, we're looking to reassign this offboarding or separating employee's work product to gain maximum business continuity. So we've had some examples on screen. It's really not enough to just deprovision a user in core applications or in SSO, like Okta or Google Workspace or Salesforce and Asana. We have to take the extra step of reassigning all of their open work, open projects, and anything else they're working on to peers, managers, or other teams to make sure that you have business continuity for everywhere that work is taking place. So in this example, we're going to go into Google Workspaces and take all of the projects they're working on and reassign them. Take all of the recurring meetings they might have on the calendar and remove them. Make sure there's email forwarding happening between this offboarding employee direct to their manager. And to make sure that we're reassigning documents and anything else under this offboarding employee's ownership. An example here is if I'm leaving the company and I own the price book or price list of the business, we want to make sure that that thing doesn't get deleted or archived when I take off, but rather just reassign so that work product remains. Another example, of course, here in Salesforce, if I leave the company, all of the accounts attached to me and all of the open opportunities within those accounts should be reassigned to someone else that is taking over the territory, or at least be reassigned back to my manager to decide what to do with. As you can imagine, we have these sorts of reassignment workflows across hundreds of different applications that we integrate to directly. The next step of secure offboarding is the workflow of recovery. Now, if you recall, there's going to be that FedEx box that's sitting out with the offboarding employee for them to put in their endpoints, accessories, and any other technology objects that are owned by the company they might have in their possession. When those are physically received back to the company and are sitting with IT, IT can use Oomnitza's native mobile scanning applications to scan them back and set their status to received. At that point, that'll trigger this recover workflow. The first step of the recover workflow is to see if those endpoints are on legal hold. If they are on legal hold, we're going to finish the workflow and do nothing. If those endpoints are not on legal hold, then we're going to check whether they're a Mac endpoint or a Windows endpoint, and depending on which way they go, we'll go ahead and erase them by leveraging the system management tools or MDMs that are running on that operating system. Just to make the point again, in this example, we're using Jamf on the Mac side and VMware Workspace ONE on the Windows side, but we at Oomnitza offer integration to hundreds of different configuration management tools, MDMs, system management tools of all sorts. At this point, we'll also look to uninstall all of the desktop applications and therefore reclaim all the licenses that might be running on that endpoint as well. Again, this provides a ton of financial efficiency back to the company by reclaiming those licenses back into the available pool for future use. We can also look to terminate any AWS, or other infrastructure resources that might be attached to this employee's ownership. And that would conclude our technology recovery phase. The next and final step of secure offboarding is the workflow of end-of-life and reallocation. In this step, we decide whether this endpoint will be reused and reallocated or set to end-of-life and disposed. At this point, the endpoints have been recovered, wiped, and sanitized, and are therefore ready to be reallocated or disposed. Now, if the endpoint can be reallocated depends on the warranty end date and how much useful warranty life it has remaining. Obviously, you do not want to give out an endpoint that is close to its warranty end date, otherwise it'll just come back as a boomerang too soon after. So the rule we set in this case is to look at the warranty end date, and if it has more than 3 months of warranty life remaining, then we'll take the endpoint, set its status to available, and reintroduce it to the inventory pool to be reallocated to another user. If the endpoint, however, has less than 3 months of useful warranty life, then we'll start the process of end-of-lifing that endpoint by first retiring the endpoint, which will trigger a disposition process, and to update the financial management system the company uses, more specifically dispose that endpoint in the fixed assets module. In this case, we feature an integration that we have with Oracle NetSuite to run this process to completion. After this is complete, this formally concludes our process of secure offboarding.